welcome to a very special episode of Storytime with Mr. Lawrence. In this episode, I'm not going to be recounting the plot of a famous play as I have done in the past, but rather I wish to expand on the rather macabre reputation that has sprung up around one of the plays we have previously discussed, that being Shakespeare's Macbeth. From almost its inception, from the day it was written and first performed to the modern times, Macbeth, more so than any other play, seems to be feared within the theatrical community because it has been plagued by a string of horrific events that occur during its production and performance. Now, I've worked in live theater all of my adult life, and I can tell you that accidents and mishaps, they happen on every production. It is the byproduct of working in live theater. Something is going to go wrong at some point in time. It just is. But it seems that when we look back at the production history of Macbeth, we see that it seems to be plagued by more than its fair share, and in most cases, more than its fair share of potentially lethal and lethal occurrences. All this has conspired to create a myth around this production, a myth that has become very entrenched in theatrical lore. One of the most highly held superstitions in the theater is that you should never say the name of this play aloud in a theater. Because if you do, bad things will happen. Now, is all this just superstition? Or is there actually something to these stories? Well, let's take a look back and see where did this come from, and let's revisit some of the occurrences that have befallen productions of this play. So, where does this superstition come from? Well, it comes from a number of sources. The superstitious belief is that this play is cursed because of the inclusion of the witches and their various incantations: double, double, toil and trouble, fire, burn, and cauldron, bubble, and so forth. The story goes that Shakespeare used actual incantations in the play itself, and that a coven of witches whom he had taken the incantations from saw the play, were very displeased with it, and they put the curse upon the show. So that's the superstitious belief. Where does the actual belief come from? Well, from a number of different places. It is true that it seems like this show has suffered more than its fair share of mishaps, even during its early productions, due to the macabre nature of the material. It's a play that has to be done at night. There's no other option. Doing it in the bright sunny day robs it of a lot of its power. So it's a production that normally needs to be done in the evening. So imagine being in one of these theaters in Elizabethan times, these theaters made of wood that had hay on the floor to help catch some of the grime. And now imagine that you are doing this at night, where there is no lighting equipment and no natural light with which to illuminate the stage. So how then are you going to make sure everybody can see the action? Fire. Torches. Torches. Yes. Large torches around the perimeter of a heavy wooden structure lined with hay. What could go wrong? Well, the answer to that is a number of theaters burned down during productions of Macbeth. There are reports even of people being trampled to death during the evacuations because, of course, they didn't have fire exits back then. So, this happens several times, and you can see how a reputation starts to grow. Moreover, in the British Civil War, when the Puritans were kind of sweeping through London, one of the first things they did was close all the theaters. Again, clutching to that age-old belief that the theater is a den of sin. The few theaters that were left were going under fast and needed big box office. And as it turns out, a play that a lot of them attempted to use to get audiences back was Macbeth. It was a crowd pleaser. However, it was also a very expensive play to produce. You needed a lot of different things. You needed a head. So what would happen is that Macbeth would be one of the last plays that many theaters did before they were permanently shut down. So combine this with the unfortunate incidents of theaters burning to the ground during productions, and you can see how people would start to say, you know, maybe there's something going on in this play. However, the incidences don't stop at the Elizabethan era. As history progresses, as new technology comes into existence, as new actors take up the mantle, we find that the bizarre series of incidences around the show don't stop, they increase. Let's take a look at a couple of famous productions and some of the misfortunes that befell them. At a production of Macbeth at the Old Vic Theatre in 1937, the director nearly got killed in a car crash. Vera Lindsay, who was playing Lady Macbeth, was badly burned during one of the productions. Sir Laurence Olivier, who was playing Macbeth, lost his voice and then almost died when a weight from one of the stage lights came crashing down from the catwalks and slammed into the stage right where he had been standing a moment before. The founder of the theater had a heart attack and died opening night, and most famous of all, during the final battle scene where Macbeth and Macduff are dueling, Laurence Olivier and the other actor are doing their stage fight, and they hit their swords together. The sword breaks off, the tip of it goes flying into the audience and stabs a member of the audience sitting in the front rows. At another production, this one starring renowned British actor Sir John Gielgud, the third witch fell ill and died of a heart attack during the final rehearsal. The actor who played King Duncan died of angina. One of the witches in one of their rehearsals was dancing around the cauldron, but they noticed that she couldn't maintain the tempo of the music, and she just suddenly collapsed and died on stage. Finally, in a 1947 production starring Harold Norman, in the final scene, Norman fell, as he's supposed to do, because, Macbeth dies. But instead of dying on stage, as they had rehearsed, he crawls into the wings and reports to the backstage director, "I've been stabbed." He was taken to a hospital, and he died later that month. Later, it had come to light that in the dressing room that he was sharing with another actor, he had been loudly quoting the unmentionable name, refusing to stop even after he'd been warned. And these are just a few of the incidences that have cropped up during productions of Macbeth. Now, something you need to keep in mind as we're discussing this is that these are not UFO sightings. These are not blurry pictures of Bigfoot striding across the wilderness. These are documented incidents with witnesses. These things actually happened. Now, one of the questions I get asked whenever I bring up this subject is, of course, do you believe in the curse? And my answer to that is, I didn't used to. But 3 stitches above my left eye taught me the valuable lesson that you don't have to believe in a curse, but you better learn to respect it. Let me share with you 2 incidences that happened to me that revolved around productions of Macbeth. Now remember that the saying goes that you can't say the name Macbeth in a theater. You just can't. Outside the theater is fine, here in my apartment is fine, but in the actual theater, you cannot call the play by its name. You have to use one of the many, many aliases this play has had assigned to it. The Scottish play, Mackers, Shakespeare. Some people call it Macduff. There are hundreds of different aliases, but you can never say the actual name. Well, this incident happened when I was in college, and I was assistant directing a small production of a play called Somewhere in Between. Within the dialogue of that play, they mention Macbeth several times, and they use direct quotes from Macbeth several times. This is another thing you're supposedly not supposed to do. You are not supposed to use big chunks of the dialogue outside of its native play. This, of course, sparked some level of discomfort among some of the cast. They were very uncomfortable saying this word out loud, even as part of their written lines. To understand the rest of this story, you must understand 2 universal truths. Number 1, men are dumb. And number 2, men in their early 20s are even dumber. This is not a slam. This is a fact of life. I, being male, and at the time in my early 20s, full of that overinflated sense of self that you tend to get at that age, said, I'm not afraid. You're all just being superstitious. It's stupid. I am not scared of this. And I stood dead center in that stage, and I shouted that name at the top of my lungs. Well, during the course of this particular production, one of my responsibilities was to teach a bit of stage combat to one of our younger actors. In the bit, he is supposed to take a cane. As a matter of fact, this cane right here was supposed to take this cane, swing it at one of the other actors. She was supposed to duck. He was supposed to spin all the way around. She to kick him in the rear end in a comic fashion. So it was my job to work with this young actor who had never done any stage violence before and help get him smooth. So we took him out, we ran it again and again and again in slow motion, multiple times. Finally, the moment arrives. Bring him in, let's see how it looks. Okay. I can't tell you to this day why I decided to stand where I did. We had a thrust stage, meaning that the stage jutted out into the audience and had audience on all 3 sides. You could sit in the first row and put your feet on the stage. People did this. It annoyed me. Where I was sitting was to stage right on the railing that separated the audience from the stage. And I take up my position. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see how it looked from that angle. And we said, Danny, do it at full speed. Danny comes out. He takes the cane. He goes full speed. He spins around. The actor ducks and crack. He smacked me upside the head with the cane. Split me open right here. 3 stitches above my left eye later. And I decided that perhaps saying Macbeth in a theater was maybe not the smartest thing I had ever done. Now, you may call that an isolated incident and a byproduct of my own stupidity, and on the latter, you would be absolutely correct. However, that was not the only accident that befell us during that production. One of the other actors who said the name during the production as part of his lines, while trying to cut, I believe he was making cookies that night, and trying to cut the cookie, the knife got stuck, and he pushed it too hard, and schwamp, right into his hand. He had to get a huge number of stitches, barely missed severing the tendon. To this day, he has a large scar along his hand. Other actors got cut during the production, and we had at least one instance of a broken bone. Now, as I've said, in any live production, you are going to have mishaps and you're going to have accidents. But it certainly does seem that that title brings about more than its fair share. Again, isolated incidents? Just bad luck? Perhaps. But let me leave you with this little tidbit. A few years back, I directed my first production of Macbeth. I was very excited. I'm a big fan of the play, and was thrilled to put my own spin on it. During the course of that rehearsal process, I got a kidney stone. We lost 3 days of rehearsal because the school shut down halfway through the day due to air conditioner problems, and my hometown was struck by a 7-point earthquake. So, when people ask me, do you believe in the curse? My response is always, you don't have to believe in it, but you better respect it.